think we should probably kick off. Yeah, that's okay. Right, so good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of ARAC. Obviously this is the first meeting since the committee, its membership has been revised and updated. So first of all, obviously delighted to welcome new members to ARAC, equally delighted to welcome back existing members, and I think we've got two people who have rejoined ARAC, is that right? So I believe Craig, is that right? Councillor Collins?
Yep.
You were on ARAC and have now come back. You've missed us.
Yes, I've chaired this and vice chaired it as
Excellent.
well in the past.
Excellent. Well, welcome back. Just a few quick words of introduction from my good self. So I took over as chair of ARAC on the 1st of October last year. Delighted to do so. Tiny bit of background on me. I have lived in the West Midlands for the last 47 years. So very much part of this part of the world. Prior to this, I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the large accounting firms, for 36 years. I ran their practice in the Midlands for 7 years, and then I was the COO for PwC's National Audit and Risk operation for the last 4 years. I retired from PwC on the 30th of September, and on the 1st of October I started as the chair of ARAC here. So delighted to be in the role, but yeah, this is sort of 9 months in. I should say probably as an opening comment as well, that it obviously those who are new to this committee, very happy to meet up with you individually, one-to-one basis, if you like to have a conversation about ARAC, how it works, how any questions or queries you may have around ARAC. So that offer is always open. My email address and my telephone number are available as well at any point in time if anybody wants to have any conversations with me. So please feel free to do so. We are also talking about the possibility of some sort of induction or to ARAC and the broader roles within the Combined Authority. We're talking to Dan Essex, who works with the board on that. We'll come back to you in terms of what and when something might be put in place around that as well. So, as I say, welcome, Councillor.
Chair, on that point, last point of induction, I remember about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was a pack produced for structures and everything else when I joined the audit committee here. And that pack was given, and chief executive and some other officers came round to introduce themselves first as an introduction of it and so on. That was very helpful. But since then, somehow that things phased out. So maybe good idea to revive that. Those new members, they can understand what actually structure is and how we work, not just looking at this particular report, maybe the overall picture as well. So maybe good idea to revive that. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had similarly had an induction pack, but and then it's actually very kindly arranged for me to meet various people. And I say that's what I've spoken to Wendy about, and I'm told by Wendy that Dan Essex is charged with putting something in place. So we'll follow up with Dan to see as and when that's going to happen. As a minimum, though, we can obviously share with you the written documentation around the governance structures of the Combined Authority. Okay, right. We've got a reasonable agenda today to get through. I am keen that we obviously take each item and give it due consideration, but there are a couple of very important points for us to pick up in the private session at the end of the meeting, and therefore it's important that we give that enough time and due consideration. So we will go through at a reasonable pace, but please, I really do encourage and welcome engagement from, interjection from other members of the committee in terms of the discussions that we'll be having. In terms of apologies for the meeting today, Tam?
Yes, Chair. You've received apologies from Councillor Peter Allen, Councillor Yvonne Mosquito, Councillor Mike Sutherland and Sean Farnell. Chair, sorry, can we just quickly go around so I can know who all the councillors are, because this is a new committee for me, so I know obviously two councillors, but I don't know everyone, so I just need to check quorum. Is that okay?
Yeah, please, no problem at all.
My name is Councillor Dave Boyley from Dudley Metropolitan Borough.
I'm Ram Lakha from Coventry.
Fiona Bevington, I'm the Head of Business Planning and Performance.
Lorraine Quibell, Internal Audit Liaison Officer.
Yes, Sash Mystery, I'm the Interim Director of Law and Governance and the Monitoring Officer for this purpose.
Mark Smith, Chair of ARAC.
Louise Cowan, Head of Financial Management.
And Mark Wilkes, representing Audit from Wolverhampton.
Yeah, Peter Farrell, the Head of Audit for City of Wolverhampton Council, and deliver the internal audit service to the West Midlands Combined Authority too.
Councillor Craig Collinsworth, Wolverhampton Council.
Morning, I'm Khurram Ahmed and I'm from the Young Combined Authority leading.
Councillor Akim Memi from Walsall Borough.
Councillor Richard Baxter Payne from the Neath and Bedworth Borough Council.
So, Chair, I can confirm you're not quorum for this meeting.
So we've got 6 plus chair, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So there are 13 members of ARAC, but I'm a non-voting member of ARAC. We need 2/3 of voting members of ARAC to be present for us to be quorum. So we need 8 members to be present for us to be quorum. Hence, we're not quorum for today. One thing I just really need to stress as strongly as possible is that it's really important that we have quorum meetings wherever possible. The next meeting that we have in October is the meeting at which we consider and recommend for approval the annual financial statements. Of all the meetings that we have, that's the most important that we have quoracy. So could I just stress to everybody who is here, please make every effort to attend the meeting in October. And obviously, if we can speak to, Tanya, if we can speak to the other people who are not here today and stress the importance of them being here at the October meeting, which is in the diary, that would be really helpful. Am I right in also thinking, there is the scope for substitutes to come to meetings as well?
There is, yes.
Yeah, it's in the pack.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I saw that in the last board pack.
It's in the board pack, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I saw that in the last board pack as well. So I suppose the other point that we should be stressing to members of the committee who are unable to attend a meeting, that they should be making every effort to send their substitutes if they're not able to personally attend. So I don't think I've ever seen a substitute in the 4 or 5 meetings that I've been involved with.
On that point, Chair, I know that there's a provision in it, but I think there's also issue that are they trained people sometimes they don't know what they're suddenly coming in and don't know what we are talking or you are talking about and the officers are on there. So it'd be a good idea to have those people who are actually members and rather than substitute. Our substitute is a bit of fast, rather, to be honest. I know we need to do the quorum. But it's a good idea with members who understand, who are working in the audit section somewhere in their own areas. They understand a bit how we work. Thank you.
I completely agree. It should be a matter of last resort,
yeah.
But it's better to have a substitute than not to be quorum. I would suggest. Okay. So thank you. In terms of declarations of interest, just to remind members the need to declare any disclosable interest. Obviously, again, for new members of the committee, please, if there's anything that you need to declare at this point, please let us know. Not, we will get on to Chair's remarks. I just want to obviously talk a little bit about the new members. Just very quickly for members of the committee, I did this last time and 1 or 2 people said they appreciated it. So just to let you know, since our last meeting, which was the 12th of April, there's obviously been a board meeting which I observed on our behalf. Been 2 investment board meetings which I've also observed on our behalf. I've also had a meeting with the chief exec and I've had a meeting with the chair of overview and scrutiny, Councillor Baton, who is I think just been reconfirmed in that role. Myself, Councillor Lacker and Councillor Butt actually from the last time also attended a previous call with the chairs of audit for the Midlands, which was arranged by Robert Montgomery and the chair of Telford and Region or Shropshire? Telford. I had a subsequent follow-up call with Mr Montgomery on the 17th of May and with Amy Beaton of the Local Government Authority Association for the Midlands. And there is another meeting that is being organised for chairs on the 23rd of August. I don't know to what extent others have been invited to those calls, but just to let you know, that forum does exist and we're trying to ensure that forum and this body are coordinated in some of the things that we're doing. So just to let you know that's that was it from Chair's remarks. Satish, terms of reference.
Yeah.
Just a quick one.
Thank you, Chair. Just I thought it would be helpful if I and possibly Louise on behalf of the Section 151 officer just said a few words in relation to the purpose of AREC. It's unfortunate that we haven't done a proper induction. I think what's happened is it's fallen by the wayside as part of the new mayoral election. So normally would have done that at that point. That hasn't happened for after reasons around COVID and so forth. So apologies in relation to that. But just to stress that the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee is a key component of the CA's corporate governance arrangements. It's a statutory committee which is set up, and I think the purpose of it is a number of things which are set out in the terms of reference, and you've got the document there. But it's primarily to do with corporate governance issues and for the organisation through yourselves to be assured around issues around risk, financial arrangements, integrity, process, all of that in a sense, right? So it's a really important committee, and that's not just me saying that as a monitoring officer, but it's actually ensures from the public's point of view that the public receive value for money, yeah, and that all the arrangements in relation to the CA are appropriate. So it's a very important committee, and I think you, Chair, I've said to you previously, and I would say to the committee as well, that you should take the opportunity to constructively challenge officers, particularly myself as a monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer, and we will sort of, deal with that as appropriate in a sense. Did you want to add anything, Louise?
No, nothing really to add, but I would stress the quotation. We've got Helen Lillington on screen, who's our audit manager from Grantham, and it was a feature of our annual auditor's report last year that there was a recommendation around privacy, because it's really important that for the next meeting, as the Chair's already said, that for the October meeting, that we are forward to enable us to approve the statement of accounts for 21-22, which is one of the key roles of this committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. So terms of reference are set out in section 4 of the agenda. It says actually there frequency will meet quarterly. I think we have 5 meetings a year, and that, again, those are set out in the pack for the last board meeting. So hopefully you've got all those. I have spoken to Satish about the terms of reference, but more particularly the functions part of this report, and I do think that, again, that would probably benefit from a little bit of a refresh. So we will. And if you could capture that it's worth us, and I think it's good practice actually for us as a committee to review our terms of reference and make sure that we're comfortable that it is up to date and properly reflects our responsibilities. So we will take the opportunity to do that before the next meeting and bring an updated terms of reference and set of functions to the next meeting. But any questions on the terms of reference?
All is a comment, Chair. Comment, just add, it's good reminder, though we haven't got the induction pack, but it is good to remind colleagues what we can or what we should be doing rather. So it's nice document. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just, going back from the last time I was on the committee, one of the things that regularly happened was we'd receive reports like this, and myself and the Chair would say there should be a covering report with it.
Okay.
And there's not on this particular one. I just wondered what was the reason for that. And also it just says that we are to note this report. Is it also for us to approve it, or is it just for noting this? Thanks, Chair.
Do you want to respond on that?
The terms of reference are purely there for the committee's information.
Right.
But as the Chair says, they are right for reviewing in a sense, right? So I think rather than wait for the next constitutional review, as the Chair's asked, so we will, and my apologies, we will review those terms of reference, put it to the next committee, and then get them approved by board in November.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah.
It's very good to understand some of the things. I know personally I won't question many things in it, but I'm just thinking when Steve said there's a constitutional people, he said the word we will review it. I'm trying to understand who we are. Is it yourself, the chief executive, or there are other people? Who's involved in that view? We.
My apologies, we meaning me as monitoring officer together with the 151 officer.
Right, okay, yeah. Because constitution is a big issue when you review it. There has to be, obviously, you are the legal man. So that's why there should be some input from others. That's where I was coming back. Thank you.
So I would welcome the review by the officers, and then at our next meeting on the 4th of October, I would expect us to see an updated proposal for the, and obviously the members of this committee have the opportunity to make any further comments.
Yeah.
Clearly, if you have any comments on the draft that is currently in these papers, please feed that into me and to Satish as part of that process.
Chair, just one thing. I think it might be helpful just to go through the timing because of the need to deal with the audit matter at the end.
Yeah, no problem at all. As has been highlighted, we need to make sure that we do need a lot of time for items 14 and 15 on the agenda. And therefore, those who are presenting later in the meeting, could you be mindful of that particular point? Right, minutes of the last meeting, item 5 on our agenda. First of all, could we, any comments as to the accuracy of those minutes for those who are present? Everybody comfortable that they're an accurate record?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Matters arising on those minutes. I think one or two of these matters are covered in the agenda for today. So in terms of the appointment of external auditors, I think Louise, you're going to just very quickly update us on that in item 8 on our agenda. There was a discussion about the annual business plan last time around, and we had a discussion on, there were 2 matters of follow-up there. One was regarding the number of vacancies that we have. And I think you've come back, Fiona, and confirmed that 42 is deemed to be a reasonable number in the current environment.
That's right, and there are actually very few vacancies that are over 6 weeks.
Okay.
At the moment, we've got 6 vacancies that are over 6 weeks, and they are quite specialist roles.
Okay.
But no, we're not seeing anything untoward really there. It is that the number of vacancies is similar to many local authorities.
Okay, so for the other members of the committee, the question that came up when we were reviewing this was capacity really, and whether there were concerns around that. But the second question, I think, which Councillor Lacker had raised, was around the number of people on temporary contracts. Do you have any?
I don't have figures for you, but we are. Sorry, apologies. I don't have figures for you. I'll probably be able to get them before the end of the meeting. We're doing a big piece of work at the moment around temporary contracts. So not only temporary contracts, but fixed term contracts as well. So since the last ARAC, there has been some changes to the structure, and I've got a workforce management lead within my team who is doing a piece of work across the organisation to understand where we have opportunities that could be filled internally, but also to look at things like skills and talent to make sure that we make the most of our workforce instead of having temporary or contract staff. But let me get some figures for you.
Okay, thank you. On the risk update, which you are kindly covering for us, there was also a question just about confirming why the strategic risk in relation to adult education had been de-escalated to be an operational risk, not a strategic risk. I don't know whether it's not covered in the paper.
No, so there was a de-escalation of the AEB risk.
Yeah.
They felt that there were some processes in place that had that were sufficient to stop that particular risk from happening. So we've spent some time working with Claire Hatton, who's the operational director. She recognised that they'd not undertaken some of the necessary checks because of the pandemic, but that situation has been resolved. And they are now working with Peter Estrella, the risk manager, to develop a risk register, an operational risk register in their area to move this onto.
Okay.
It's one of the key things that he's following up with the new risk network to make sure that there are operational risk registers in place and that they're being used as a tool by the directorate leadership team as well.
Okay.
And we've got that appropriate escalation to the strategic risk register.
Okay. Okay, understand. I think again, new members of the committee, the reason why that sort of got raised was twofold. One, in terms of if you look at the overall budget, the amount of money that's spent on adult education is highly significant. Secondly, we had certain concerns raised through the whistleblowing process in the last 12 months around adult education as well. So as an ARAC, I think we were keen to understand why the risks that are associated with adult education had therefore been taken off the strategic risk register and put into the operational risk register. But I think that's one we'll continue to watch if that's okay. Okay, other matters coming out. We've obviously got an update on internal audit, so I think we can probably pick up one or two of the points there, including on cyber essentials, which is again item 14 on our agenda. There's a point on external audit. I think again, Louise, you've came back to me on the fact that BDO had stepped down as chair as external auditors of MML and had been replaced by a Williamson and Croft. That was because BDO declined to participate in the audit tender, I understand. Yeah. I'm not sure there's no reasons associated with that have been brought to our attention as an organisation. So it is what it is. Okay. And
no, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a silly comment, but I thought I frightened him when I said when he said I'm going to write myself in the other side. I said, why can't you ask somebody else to write it for you? I thought that's perhaps a petty argument, but this is not the reason why there is a change. Thank you.
I think the MML board just ran a tender process and the BDO declined to participate in it, but they have confirmed that there were no reasons associated with their resignation that we should be aware of. So it is what it is, and you'll update us on the next process. Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? Any other matters arising that people have? Okay, those who
Except for Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, item 7, Louise, a couple of verbal updates for us, just follow up in some extent.
Thank you, Chair. So an update on the accounts process for 21-22, and a huge thank you to the finance team for all their commitment, because that document, which is 116 pages long, I think, there was a lot of effort went into that in April and May, and also a huge thank you to the Chair for your feedback, which was really helpful. So the draft accounts were signed by Linda Horn, our Finance Director, on the 23rd of June after the final review, including the review by the Chair, and the Chair also Chair also shared the draft accounts with you all on Monday, 27th of June, and the audit process started on the same day. The fieldwork will take place over the summer with the aim of having the accounts signed off by the committee on the 4th of October, as we've mentioned earlier on. So just a very quick update. That's all I wanted to say, really, unless there's any questions or anything that Helen wants to add.
So just to the committee, I did get a chance to review the draft accounts. I've gone through them in detail and passed on my comments, and those comments are reflected in the copy that was sent to members of the committee. We were keen to get your input before today, if possible. Clearly, the accounts don't get approved until October. There may be events that emerge that require being reflected in those accounts by the 4th of October as well. So, but if you do have any comments on the accounts or anything that comes to mind that you please do make sure that you feed that in as soon as possible to the finance team so that they can get that reflected. Councillor Lacker, and then Helen from GT, if there's anything else you wish to add.
Just yeah, because it was a big document, very lengthy document to get through. I skimmed over a few areas. Then I decided, well, I trust you rather than me, because you are more technical than me. So I think that's the best way to deal with it.
Thank you. The one thing I suppose there were two things specifically to mention. There is one outstanding matter which was referenced in the notes. So there are some issues to do with valuations which hadn't been received by the time of the accounts, which are flagged as being a matter that needs to be concluded upon. If I was to direct you to anything in particular in those accounts, it is the annual governance statement, because that is the statement. It's about 6 or 7 pages long. can't remember what pages it is in the document, but that's the one thing that we as a committee really do need to be comfortable is a fair reflection. Now, to be fair to the new members of the committee, it reflects largely activity of the last 12 months. So to some extent, we have to rely on those of us who've been on the committee for the last 12 months. But I say one area where I would, if you are, and I appreciate it is a long and very technical document in stages, but if there's one area that I would encourage you to read, it is certainly the annual governance statement, because that is what we're formally signing off on. Helen, anything other than to confirm you will be ready for the 4th of October? Is there anything else that you wish to add?
Good morning, everybody. So I suppose what I would confirm is, yes, we have the accounts. Yes, we are working our way through them. There are a lot of queries going backwards and forwards between both teams at the moment, probably as we speak. I suppose what I would say is the resources are such that we have the right resource in at the moment to enable us to complete by the end of September. As always, what I will say is that is reliant on the pension fund providing us the necessary assurance. So the West Midlands Pension Fund audit would need to be completed to such a state that we have the required assurances from them. As members will recall, there's nothing unusual about that. That's the way it is. If Grant was here, Grant would tell you that he's the auditor around the West Midlands Pension Fund, so to some extent, and we are trying to work together to get both of those audits finished at the same time. I suppose just one thing it's worth members being aware of, and it's something that we talked about at the last committee, was around the ongoing SIPFA consultation around infrastructure assets. For those members that are members on audit committees elsewhere, I'm sure you'll have heard that there is a national issue around infrastructure assets in terms of the way they have been treated across the sector. I think the emergency consultation has now come to an end, but we are waiting for SIPFA to potentially put in place some different arrangements, and that will impact on the year that we're talking about. We've done some preemptive work already with Louise's finance team to try and understand what your arrangements are around that and whether it's likely to have an impact. So just being aware that that is a sort of evolving national issue, which we hope won't impact, but we have very limited control about whether that will or whether that won't. So it's just making you aware of that issue, really. But other than that, nothing else from me.
Thank you, Helen. Helen is obviously from Grant Thornton, our external auditor.
Okay. I mean, this is my first meeting. I'm trying to understand the, also like I said, we should have an induction, but nevertheless, you mentioned government. I found some lack of transparency on leveling of funding and how they actually showcase the bidders.
Sorry,
lack of transparency on leveling of funding,
right,
and how they shortlist bidders.
Okay.
You will bid for the projects.
Yeah. That is a separate topic, which probably we pick up as part of the risk review. If we could pick up on that part of the agenda, is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is
no problem at all.
Yeah.
So when we pick up on the SRR,
the agenda, right? This is the reason why I asked for the agenda. See,
yeah,
and
yeah, no problem at all.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll pick it up on item 9 if that's okay, because it's an important part of the risk.
Yeah, okay, all right.
No problem at all. That's it.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on the back of the auditor's comments about West Midlands Pension Fund, in terms of a declaration of interest, I am a member of the West Midlands Pension Fund Committee.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And I should probably just point out that I'm also the head of audit for West Midlands Pension Fund on a similar note.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Emma. I'll hand over back to Louise in a second. Just to one tiny bit of context for you, which I picked up from the PSA about timeliness of signing off accounts. They issued their recent monitoring report. You may or may not be interested to know that for March 21 accounts, only 9% of those accounts have been signed off by 30th of September. We signed ours off in October, November. Even by 31 March 22, only 52% of accounts have been signed off within 12 months. So I'd like us to be in the 9%, clearly. We weren't quite last year, but fortunately we're also not in the 48% of organisations that still haven't signed off their accounts 12 months after the year end. So just a bit of context for you.
Sadly, I'm one of them.
And Mark, would you mind me saying that you would have been in the 9% if your meeting would have been Cora in the September, which is what we pointed out in our auditor's annual report. So it does really go to demonstrate that you were really, really close, and that Coracy point is really, really key in terms of you being able to achieve that deadline.
I think that is fair, Helen, but I think there are also comments coming through from your technical department right at the end as well. So, you know, I think we need to work together to make sure we're there for the 4th of October. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think we could have signed. We were ready to go. So I think it's just we do need to really, really work together to make sure that we do achieve that, because it's frustrating for everybody if we don't make it due to technicalities. I think we probably all agree.
Agreed. Right. Unless there's any further questions on that, Louise, again, quickly on the PSA audit appointment process. I think we only need a very quick update on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, really quick update on the public sector audit appointment process. So on the 22nd of September 2021, authorities were formally invited to become opted-in authorities for the 5 years commencing 1st of April 2023, and members will recall that the combined authority opted in along with all of our constituent authorities and 470 out of 475 eligible bodies. So that was 99% of eligible bodies opted in. A market engagement took place towards the end of 2021 and again in January of 2022, and the work is being packaged up into a number of lots. So just the quick run through the indicative timescale. So the contract notice was published on the 7th of February 2022, and selection questionnaires were evaluated during the period 19th of March to 4th of April. The invitation to tender was issued to shortlisted suppliers on the 7th of April, and the deadline for tender submission is the 11th of July, so that's next week. The contract award decisions will be made around about the beginning of August, and contracts will then be awarded towards the end of August. And effectively, we're just waiting to find out what the outcome of the process is. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
So I just asked Louise to update the committee because, you know, this is important for us as an ARAC in terms of our external auditors. That process is ongoing. The decision on that will be made before our next meeting. So, but effectively our decision was to opt in, and then obviously we are in receipt of the decision as to who gets awarded. I think I also flagged previously, there is concern around capacity in the external audit market, and also the criteria that is being used by PSA this time around is also been modified to be more about ability to deliver as well as value for money. And but we will be notified, and I think we should probably let the committee know what the outcome of that is, and obviously we can pick it up at our next meeting. But that was all I wanted to say on that, unless there are any further questions. Okay, right, Fiona, again, if I could encourage a reasonably quick run through the items on the strategic risk register. So this is, again, new members of the committee, this is something that we've been requesting each meeting now, that this update to the SRR is brought to us every meeting for our consideration, so that we are aware and are able to consider how strategic risks are being considered, evaluated, updated by the SLT.
Sorry, Chair, is this item 9 now?
This is item 9 now, correct.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. I've shared some slides on screen. They are actually in your pack. So there is a paper as well, and that is for information. ARAC are asked to consider and note the risks in the strategic risk register and note the key messages. So within the presentation, I will really ask ARAC members to focus on the slides and some of the key messages following the deep dive exercises that we've undertaken. So within the contents of the slide pack, there's a strategic risk map, a heat map, and there's also the trends. So you'll be able to see how those risks have moved over the last few years. And there's also the key messages, which is where I will talk about the work that we've undertaken since March. So this is our WMCA strategic risk heat map. And you can see that we have got a significant number of risks up in the top red area. These are the ones that are highest at risk, and there's 2 new risks there as well. So you can see that there is detail in the paper around the revisions to those risks, but I will just briefly talk through that for you. So following SLT agreement in March, Peter Estrella, who's our risk manager, undertook a series of deep dives into some of our highest risks, those in the top red corner. It was a really useful exercise, and it resulted in a number of significant changes to those 6 risks, including the development of those 2 new risks, and that's all detailed in this desk. So moving on to look at the strategic risk trend, this shows how risks have moved within that heat map over a period of time from July 21. And you can see that actually there hasn't been a significant amount of movement in some of those risks. So whilst the deep dive exercises that Peter undertook were a useful exercise, it wasn't without its challenges. And he's given some thought to how we might improve and refresh the challenge to the strategic risk register, which the SLT have approved. So the first suggestion is a cycle of reviewing all high risks and remaining risks every 6 months. Gathering risk information from alternative sources so that Peter can propose revisions to the strategic risk register ahead of sharing with the first and second line risk owners, and getting their specific input on the draft of the revised risks that they own. We've also reintroduced a risk network of representatives across the combined authority. So when the strategic risk register was being developed and the framework was being developed, we did have a working group. So we've revived that, and every directorate has provided a first point of contact, and they're there to look at how the combined authority is managing risk and for gathering any evidence of strategic risks at a directorate or a programme level. We're also engaging with colleagues across our own directorate, the Finance and Business Hub, to ensure that we capture risk from other sources. So, for example, we've got a new performance management system. So again, that's an opportunity. We work very closely with colleagues in assurance and appraisal as well to have a look at their activity from the health checks, for example, or looking at business cases to again provide a triangulated view of risk. We're also looking at engaging with CMT to offer colleagues across the first line of defence an opportunity to challenge the evidence that we're putting together and to feed in their views on the strategic risks. So the slide that you can see now, as I say, there isn't a lot of movement in some of those risks. Everything that I've detailed is a way of us making sure that we triangulate risks and make sure that there's those assessments and things move, actually, because it does imply, if things don't, that there's a level of comfort around the risk. So, okay, moving on. 10 strategic risks in that top red corner, of which 3 have got the highest residual rating. Now, to talk through some of the key messages, really, there are 2 new risks. So SLT were content with the risk register and the assessment of the risks and the activity, but they had a particular focus on the financial risks and discussed the investment programme risk in some depth. They felt that it probably wasn't framed correctly and have asked Peter to look at this in a bit more detail. There was also the inflation risk, which is the new one of the new ones. We've had some really engaging and good conversations with colleagues from Transport for West Midlands, from the Finance Department and from Housing and Regen. And whilst SLT recognised it was a fair representation of the likely effects on the WMCA, it also is a very live issue across projects across the CA. They're the two new risks. In terms of some of those key messages, you'll see that one is around failure to deliver the investment programme. So we didn't feel that that was particularly framed correctly. So there's ongoing work with that. And the financial resilience of WMCA to absorb fiscal shocks. Again, it presents a very high risk, and we need to be mindful that our response to these could have an adverse effect on the risk.
Okay.
3 more key messages here around delivery of the Commonwealth Games, information assurance and protective security, and I believe you've got a presentation later with Jason.
Yes, we have.
And then around capacity and capability.
Yeah.
So the 3 risks that weren't reviewed in the deep dives that are in that top red corner are external factors, stakeholder and political relations, and commerciality and COVID-19 effects. So we're undertaking deep dives, and they'll be presented in September.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah. So I had an opportunity to go through this with the team in advance of the meeting. So I was very pleased to see the inflation risk be added in. And actually, if you look in the detailed wording, it also references labour shortages, because I think that is one of the key things that is emerging in the current economic environment in which we're operating. That part of that inflation risk is clearly linked to labour shortages. So I very much welcomed the introduction of that as a new risk. Our job is not to do the risk register. Our job is here to make sure, provide some degree of oversight and make sure that the SLT are considering strategic risk. I very much, I'm encouraged by the fact that this is being regularly reviewed and considered and updated, and as things develop. Just wanted to come back to your specific question, though, actually, around the levelling up fund and how can I put this? Obviously, developments in the last 48 hours at a national level are probably another factor that will impact on levelling up and the progress that will be made and the bids that have been placed. So I don't know, Fiona, did you want to just comment on that?
So in terms of levelling up, but also the Trailblazer devolution deal as well. So given the significance of those, we felt that it would be appropriate if there was a strategic risk that reflected this. We're working with Ed Cox, who's the Director of Strategy and Net Zero. And he's looking at some of the work required to update those risks. But we think it's also important to present some of the opportunities as well around levelling up and the Trailblazer. So we want to continue to have those conversations and provide a more robust update in September, because obviously there's ongoing work around the Trailblazer Devo and what we're submitting in terms of levelling up Trailblazer.
Okay. All right. So this is very much a live issue, a very current issue. Some aspects are slightly outside of our control, however, but I think it's a really important point that you've raised, and I think we should explicitly ask for that to be considered at the next meeting. Any other questions on the SRR and the update to it?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. I just wondered what I chair the audit committee at Wolverhampton. What we do is when we have a meeting, we can call a risk from the risk register in, particularly if it's a high risk, for the committee to dive into it more deeply. I just wondered if that's something we consider here, time permitting, particularly the high ones. I mean, you mentioned a couple of new ones there, didn't you? Particularly the one that I just that sticks out to me is the Metro tram availability. I would like to discuss that in more depth as an ARAC, if that's possible at a future committee.
Absolutely, we'd welcome engagement from ARAC into the deep dives that we undertake.
Yeah, so perhaps, Chair, that's something you can consider then.
Yeah, no, very happy to do that. I'll speak to both Satish and Peter about that, but I agree. It's we have done that on various occasions in the past. No problem. Any further questions on the SRR? If not, and again, mindful of time, so Peter, are you leading us through the internal audit? Sorry, if you're leading us through the internal audit, maybe just pick out the highlights of the report that you've issued to us. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the latest update from ourselves as the internal auditors for the Combined Authority. Previous members of our may recall that at the start of the year you approved the internal audit plan, which lists a dozen or so areas where we intend to do internal audit reviews during the year that we agree with yourselves and the senior officers within the Combined Authority. Then we go away and complete those reviews, do a report for each one. Every time we do a report in a particular area, depending upon the nature and type of the issues and recommendations we raise, which we rate red, amber or green, then at the conclusion of each review we give an overall level of assurance for that particular area. And there are 4 levels of assurance that we give. We can give no assurance, which means, we found quite a few significant issues of concern. Limited assurance, again, there are issues of concern and that need addressing. Satisfactory, things are working well but could possibly work better. And substantial, while there may be a few sort of little issues that could be tightened up on, generally that particular area is operating well and has a strong internal control framework. In this report on page 36 and 37, we just update members of our ACC on the work that we've completed to date. And as you'll see there, we've recently issued 3 reports. All 3 had satisfactory levels of assurance. They were across ICT strategy, Dudley interchange and the affordable housing delivery vehicle, so 3 pretty distinct and varied areas. We've appended those reports for members' information so that you have the bigger picture as such, and you'll note in our reports we only report by exception, so where we think there are issues that need addressing, we include those. However, to make sure you get a bigger picture as such, we also try and include a section towards the start of the report where we identify good areas of practice that we've identified, so we don't just necessarily just look for things that are bad. Where we think things are good, we'll obviously highlight and flag those for your attention as well. Going back to our update report on page 36 and 37, you'll also note that we've got 2 or 3 audits in progress, field work in progress. We've commenced planning on another 3, and we've just issued a draft report on the delivery programme, but we don't bring that to our ACC until we finalised it and agreed the action plan with members. So all being well, that will come to your October meeting, and hopefully 1 or 2 of the other audits where we've got the field work in progress too. So that gives you a snapshot in time of where we are at this point in time. I've got no major issues around the control, governance or risk management framework to flag to ARAC. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions on any of those reports. I'd normally at this point hand over to my colleague Sandra, who's waiting online, to give some oversight to each of those 3 individual reviews, but because I know you're pushed for time, we can sort of give that a miss if you want, or if you think that you would.
Well, I think I will invite any questions from members of the committee, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to just talk on the, I don't know if you or Ray wants to just touch on the update. One of the things I was very keen to see is that when internal audit make recommendations, those are acted on and acted on properly. So, Ray, did you want to make any comment on the status of?
Yes, certainly. So we presented a Longbridge audit report to committee last time, which had a limited rating, and I know that raised some concerns. So Chair has asked me just to provide an update on the status of that. The team have now completed the one major action, which was in relation to the contract that was in place. They have extended the contract until the end of October to give the team an opportunity to develop the new strategy of what they want that contract to include, and with that new contract being in place by the 1st of November. All the other actions that were contained within that audit report are on target for delivery within the dates that they set within the report. The one other item that is showing as an outstanding audit action was in relation to HR pre-employment checks, and the action was referring to the job descriptions wasn't highlighting what qualifications were essential and what was just desired. Again, they've done the work, so any now new roles that have been advertised and completed we are doing that essential checks and are asking for valid qualification certificates. The reason it remains open, however, it's become part of a larger programme of work to review all of the job descriptions within the organisation, and it just felt better to contain it all as one.
Okay.
So in reality, the specific action has been completed. There's just a subset of work that's going on. But completion date is expected end of July, so hopefully next time reporting that should have gone.
Very good. The other two I noticed, there's a couple of recommendations under the GDPR report, which are still to be done. And then on key financial systems, there were 9 recommendations by 31, I presume, by the way, it should be 31 May 2022, not 21.
Error, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. But by the end of June, all 9 of those were due to have been addressed. Do you know whether those further 3 items have been addressed?
They were all, I'm looking at Louise.
Oh, okay.
They were all up to date as far as I was aware. I would need to go back on my notes. I do apologise and just confirm on that one. On the GDPR one, the only item that's outstanding now is the reaccreditation of Cyber Essentials.
Which we'll hear from
Jason is joining us in a little while to update.
Okay. Can you let me know if there is any delay on the key financial systems ones, because they were pretty important?
Yeah, I'll double check as soon as we can.
Very good. In terms of the specific reports, Sandra, thank you again as ever, and I've had a chance to go through these. I suppose my only question was the classification. You know, there seemed to be some pretty important points that were flagged as simply being green recommendations, and therefore I was interested, for want of a better word, as to how you determine whether something's red, amber or green, because some of the things in green in a couple of these reports seem to be pretty important from my perspective. You know, such as in the IT report around, you know, there's 3 recommendations there, all of which seem pretty important recommendations to me. Similarly, that was the main question that I had, really.
I think on this occasion, the 3 green should sit within existing processes. So it is to apply those processes, for example, the budget setting process. And also there is the standard governance structure that this would fit into for corporate services, and then the risk identification as part of ongoing risk management. So these are enhancements to ensure that they are applied to the IT strategy. I think the amber recommendation on internal roadmap was made amber because there is an absence of that, and that would be an improvement to the delivery of the strategy.
Okay. All right. Well, I sort of understand that, but I'd say I still think they're pretty important points that you've flagged in this report, and I'm sure they're being addressed, obviously. The other one was just on the recommendation on the Dudley interchange. There was an action that had to have been done by the 30th of June. Again, given that we're sitting in the first week of July, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Just keen to make sure that that has been addressed as well.
When we do the review of updates on actions, we look at it to a point in time, and the report this time is up to the 31st of May. But yes, it is recognised that some have passed but aren't being reported as yet.
Open it up to other members of the committee. Comments, observations on the internal audit reports.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on the back of what you were sort of hinting at as well, I just thought it was with the status and level of assurance, there's 4 satisfactory levels of assurance. I just wondered if we would have expected any to have been substantial levels of assurance. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll give that through the Chair. Yes, I think it was a good point that you raised as well with regards to the classification of the recommendations, and as Sandra explained, it as if there's an existing process, it's just not applied.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be seen as serious as if there wasn't a process in the first place to be followed. But we take on board your comments, and that's something that we can take on board. And yourself, Councillor Collins, with regards to the satisfactory, yes, I guess with Commonwealth Games around the corner, we classify those as a silver medal satisfactory. So that's good. That's good. You know, it's good to have a silver, but obviously gold is the aim, and hopefully by implementing our recommendations, it would take that next level up. Plus those 3 areas that we've looked at, and the 4th one where we should the draft. They're quite complex, detailed areas that are still developing within the CA. So it's not something that's been in place for many years and people just do by nature because there's an existing process. So they are developing. So that's probably why we have flagged a few more issues and possibly we would have necessarily liked in those areas. So it's good. Bordering on very good, but yeah, could always do a little bit better.
Any other questions, Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 54 on dead lease project. So I think there is the recommendations further. I just want to understand whether the recommendations have been taken on board. There's one specifically about the quorum as well, like ours. So I'm just thinking how it's being addressed.
I do apologise. I'm sorry. I was talking to
asking where we're on the agenda. That's my fault.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat?
Item 10.
On page 54, it's a dead lease project, which is quite a sort of a wide report.
Through you, Chair, possibly I could say the recommendation has been agreed by the combined authority. It's got a target date of 31st of July this year, so its implementation should be imminent. And once that date's passed, I think, Lorraine, you would pick that up in your programme of follow-ups. You probably haven't had the opportunity to yet because we haven't met that date.
Apologies, I've lost track of myself for a moment there.
Not to worry.
Thank you, Peter.
As long as things are being done, that's fine.
Okay, any other questions on the internal audit update? Thank you again, Peter and Sandra, for that, and for obviously the ongoing work that's been undertaken. We've had 1 or 2 guests join us. We are slightly behind schedule, I'm afraid, at the moment, but we're just about to hit item 11 on the Treasury Management update, and then we'll be going to your areas if that's okay. So I think Mark's joining us via the link. Is that right, Mark? Are you there?
I am here, yes. My camera doesn't appear to be working, but I am here.
Okay, no problem at all.
Can I just come in, sorry, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
Just Linda asked me to mention that on page 69, it states Linda's the portfolio lead. That she's actually the accounting director. So just a small typo there. And the other point Linda asked me to make was this report is for noting because the Combined Authority Board has already approved it on the 15th of June, and this was an issue with the timing of the meetings because normally we would put the report before ARAC, before board, and you were at the board meeting, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah, no, I agreed. The timing hasn't worked as it should be because we have agreed that ARAC is the body that will receive this report prior to it going to the board. For various reasons, the synchronisation of the meetings was not correct. But you are right that this report was tabled and noted at the board 2-3 weeks ago.
That was 10th of June, not 15th. Is that correct?
I do apologise. Yeah.
But
so I'll hand over to
Mark to actually talk us through.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, my camera doesn't appear to be working at this moment in time, so just get my voice. The report before ARAC is the final Treasury Management report for the financial year 2021-22 and follows the strategy report that was presented in February of last year and the mid-year report in October of last year. It's been prepared in accordance with SIPA's Code of Practice on Treasury Management in the Public Services. And as we just noted, the code allows delegation of scrutiny of our Treasury Management policies and practices to a named body, and in this case, WMCA, that is ARAC. Conscious of being brief because of the timing, so the report summarises our net investment position for 21-22, provides a review of the authority's borrowing activity in year, information on future borrowing and capital expenditure forecasts, and an assessment of our long-term debt profile. And finally, confirmation that all Treasury and prudential limits were complied with in 2021-22. Rather than diving into the detail then, for the sake of brevity, if I leave it at that stage and perhaps take any questions on specific details within the report itself.
Thank you, Mark. So this is the 3rd time I've had an opportunity to go through this. So I only had one specific question. In 3.3, we say that we don't expect to be required to borrow in 22-23. But then in 5.4, we say we're likely to draw down on the facility made available by Phoenix. Am I missing something there?
Not quite, because that facility becomes available in financial year 23-24 in August of 23. Yeah, the point taken.
No, absolutely. No, point taken from you as well. I got my years mixed up. So understand. Thank you. Open it up to any other members of the committee on this report. Again, just to emphasise to new members of the committee, we have a training session provided by the advisors to the Combined Authority on Treasury matters prior to us considering the policy and the strategy, which takes place in November, December time. That was a really useful session last year. We'll put it in place again so that when we as ARAC are considering the policy and the strategy, we are doing so from an informed position as to what our responsibilities are and some of the key features of the policy. This is reporting back on the application of that policy last year. But any questions from any members of ARAC?
On the last comment, Chair, I think when Wendy sent the dates of the meetings, I was thinking, where's the training time in it? But I couldn't figure it out, but obviously that you mentioned it. I'm not sure how we're going to arrange it.
Okay, which brings us on to the next item of the agenda in a moment, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just a general point with regards to the investments. I mentioned earlier, I'm a member of the West Midlands Pension Fund.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of emphasis placed upon ethical investments.
Yeah.
And we do put a lot of work into policy on what we invest in. I just wondered if the Combined Authority did the same, and if so, is there any transparency around what we can see in terms of what kind of companies we would steer away from? Thank you.
Mark, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, of course. It's a very interesting question because the code of practice that I alluded to earlier on has been revised by SIPFA this year, and authorities are recommended to include a policy on their environmental, social and governance concerns within their credit risk section of their practices going forward. So the next iteration of our Treasury strategy for 23-24 will specifically include items in that regard, and we will also be sending an update of our Treasury management practices to ARAC in advance of that as well, which will include a section on environmental, social and governance issues with recommendations about what the authority would like to see with regards to those considerations.
You can obviously see in table 6 in the report as well where the current investments are held, which is actually largely in just call accounts, deposit accounts, and obviously a significant amount of short-term loans to other local authorities at the moment. But I think it's a really important point and getting obviously a lot of attention. So thank you for raising that. And Mark, well, yeah, we should pick that up when we look at the strategy later in the year. Any other questions on the Treasury Management report for last year? What is the given our responsibilities around this, do we need to just note this report?
At the moment,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, right. If there are no further questions on that, just the final thing was just on the forward plan, which is set out in agenda item 12. This is literally just letting members of the committee know the typical items that we'll be considering. With, I hope, emphasised enough that the meeting on the 4th of October will be for us to consider the annual accounts and the external audit report from Grant Thornton. Down there you do see on the 24th of January, actually, I apologies, I sort of said the autumn, we will have the proposal to have training in respect of our Treasury management matters. Again, to the point that was raised previously, the opportunity to influence the agenda, I'm very open to that, so please do let me know if there are particular areas or topics that you would like us to consider at future ARAC meetings, to deep dive into specific risks coming in today. Okay, right, Satish, I think we now need to pass the resolution around, exclusion of the public and press.
Yes, Chair, we need to make sure that all officers and members who aren't directly relevant to this committee leave the meeting at this point. Okay.